question that I don't know if you typically deal with on an everyday answer, but my question was, what is your opinion on evolution, and if there are any philosophical, theological issues with evolution that you...
This is a very difficult question in which I have a layman's interest. I'm not a biologist, but as a layperson, I'm very interested in this. And the current section in our Defenders class that I teach every Sunday is on this question. We have been spending now for several months a long period of time exegeting Genesis chapter 1 and now trying to provide a kind of systematic, integrative understanding of what the Bible teaches with contemporary science. And although I do not have hard and fast opinions in this area, my tentative inclination is to say that Genesis 1 is figurative language that is not meant to be taken in a literal sense, and that therefore it is quite compatible with any sort of theory of biological evolution that might be on offer. So that the question of the origin of life and biological complexity for me is not a biblical question, it's a scientific question. And the question there is, what does the evidence indicate? I think as a Christian, I'm free to follow the evidence where it leads. Now, as I look at the evidence as a layman, my understanding is that there is no adequate theory, not even a shadow of a theory that would explain the origin of life on this planet, and that the evidence is quite consistent with thinking that the origin of life required some sort of miraculous intervention by God. I don't know that, but it's consistent with the evidence. In terms of the evolution of biological complexity, it seems to me that here we need to distinguish several components of the evolutionary paradigm. One would be what's called the thesis of common ancestry, that all living organisms are descended from a single primordial ancestor. The other aspect would be the explanatory mechanisms for the evolutionary process. I think that the evidence for the thesis of common ancestry is much better than the evidence for the adequacy of the explanatory mechanisms. I'm very impressed with the genetic evidence for the thesis of common ancestry. It's not compelling, but it is certainly powerful. On the other hand, I am very skeptical about the adequacy of the proposed mechanisms. It seems to me that the idea that biological complexity can be explained on the basis of natural selection operating on random mutations involves an extrapolation from such limited cases to the grand evolutionary scenario that we can have no confidence in that extrapolation. We know that in science, these kinds of extrapolations often fail. And I just don't know of any evidence that would suggest in this case that these explanatory mechanisms, which are adequate to explain, for example, the breeding of horses or of dogs or roses, can be extrapolated to explain how a bat and a sponge could evolve from a common ancestor. So I am rather skeptical of that component of the paradigm and suspect that either the theory is going to be radically revised over the next century, or else that there needed to be, again, some kind of miraculous supernatural input into the process to bring about things that would never, in all probability, have occurred had God just left things according to their own natural powers. So that's where my thinking is at this point.
Thank you very much.